Hey, everybody, this is Lance Armstrong here with episode number 2 of the Forward Podcast. First, let me just say that I'm super appreciative for you folks who downloaded episode 1. I sort of joked in episode 1 that as the thing went on and on, there was 1, then 2, maybe 3 listeners. So the response was quite humbling. So much appreciated, and thank you again. It's been since then it's been kind of a fun yet sad week after Tim's podcast and Ride the Rockies. I spent a couple more days in Aspen, and then and I touched on this last week. We had this incident, this tragedy, really, in Kalamazoo, Michigan, where a group of cyclists were hit, and unfortunately 5 lost their lives. So I talked to the leader, or the president, I guess it's called, of the club in Kalamazoo called the Chain Gang Club. It's a guy by the name of Steve Johnson. So, and for all you cycling fans, it's not that Steve Johnson. It's just a total coincidence that he's a cyclist and his name is Steve Johnson, who was, for those of you who don't know cycling, Steve Johnson was the former president and CEO of USA Cycling, the federation. And Chain Gang Steve and I came up with this idea that we would not let this tragedy break tradition. I mean, it was tradition for the Chain Gang to ride every week. They went out probably multiple times a week, but they certainly had a ritual of a Tuesday night ride. And they had 4 or 5 loops that they would do at any given time. This particular loop was around 28 miles. And so I said to Steve, if you guys are going to ride this next Tuesday, then I'd be happy to be there, and I'd be honored to be there. And so I flew out. It was a little complicated to get there. I got to Chicago, and Higgins and I drove from Chicago to Kalamazoo, and it was super touching. I mean, I spent a couple of hours, first of all, meeting with the 4 survivors, who I'm really happy to say are doing really well. 3 of them are in great shape, relatively speaking. One of them has got a little tougher road ahead, but I think his prognosis is good. And then I had a chance to spend 30 or 40 minutes with about 40 or 50 family members of the victims, which was one of the harder things that I've ever done. To be in that room so soon after that tragedy was tough. And so, but I think for them, it was important because they not only got to meet each other, but they got to meet some of the survivors. They got to get more details about the incident. And so in some small way, there was some closure there. But all in all, I mean, I think I would sum it up and say that, we had 700 people came out for the Chain Gang ride. We had thousands more lining the street in their front yards, in their towns, at intersections, at corners, homemade signs, Kalamazoo Strong, hashtag finish the ride. The level of support in that community, which has had a tough year already, most of you know, was outstanding. And I think I would just sum it up and say that, I felt like I was riding with them as opposed to they were riding with me. So it was a touching trip. It was a tough trip, and I certainly hope to be back in Kalamazoo. Well, I shouldn't leave out the part where we finished the ride and went to Bell's Brewery, and had a couple of cold beers. That was the highlight, I think, for everybody. But I hope to be back in Kalamazoo on better terms in the near future. And then, then the weeks were, for me at least, finished up with Father's Day, which is an interesting day for me. With 5 children, I had 4 of them in Aspen and 1 of them here in Austin. I had brunch with the 4 up in Aspen, and then Isabel and I drove down to Denver and flew to Austin, and then Luke and I went out for Tex-Mex at La Mancha for Father's Day dinner, which was interesting. And we watched Game 7 of the NBA Finals. I was cheering for the Warriors, and Luke is a diehard Cavaliers LeBron fan. So we didn't have a whole lot to say at dinner, and he got the bragging rights afterwards. But it's been a great week, and By the way, it's for those of you in Austin. It's like stifling hot here. It's like it's inhumane how hot and humid it is here. I left 8,000 feet, which is, as you can all imagine, is tough to exercise in. And then you come down here we're 500 feet in Austin, but it's 97 degrees and full humidity. I mean, it literally feels like I'm at 8,000 feet. So I sort of traded one lack of oxygen for another. But anyways, been a good week, and we got a fun one today. My guest today is a friend of mine by the name of Doug Brinkley. He's a presidential historian. He's an author. He's got a really colorful past. And he's certainly not done, but he's kind of done it all, man. He's written a lot of super interesting books. Some of them, one of them, and we'll get into some of these today, but he's written The Magic Bus. He wrote The Great Deluge, which is the reason that I met him after Hurricane Katrina. He did an interesting book on John Kerry called The Tour of Duty. And then his latest book on Franklin D. Roosevelt is called Rightful Heritage. And then he's just, whether it's his history with Hunter Thompson, Sean Penn, other wacky, crazy stories that I can't wait to get into with Doug. So thanks for tuning in, and here we go. All right, so my guest today is an old friend of mine, I guess, at this point in time. We met in 2007, maybe?
Yeah, I
2007,
think so.
After you had written The Great Deluge.
Exactly.
About Hurricane Katrina. And we were at a studio here in Austin, downtown. It's one of those studios, where they have the wall set up where it looks like you're sitting in front of a window that's overlooking the Capitol, but you're really not.
Yeah,
or like a sunset or a bridge or some shit like that. And it was that place, and you were, I don't know what we were there talking about.
Yeah, no, you signed an autograph for a friend of mine in Ohio where I grew up. But also I'd come over to your house. I was amazed you had Ed Ruscha paintings because he was one of my favorites. And now he's exploding. I was out in La Jolla, California, and just saw an art show of his in the Smithsonian in D.C. And I was like, Lance likes Ed Ruscha. That's good by me.
Ed is a wonderful man. I've continued to collect him. That's some of the listeners. I mean, that's sort of like a secret, not secret, but like a side passion I have. The whole fine arts thing. But Ed he's a cool guy, man. He's like, from the old Southern guy, Stillwater, Oklahoma, and his work is so powerful. And of course, we all find work that speaks to us or resonates in some way. But just the shit he does is so cool. He did I guess this is probably this was after I had met you, but for my 40th birthday, he sent me a 40th birthday card. And it was a piece. So it was a card where he wrote Happy Birthday, Lance. But it said, in his typical, block lettering, it spelled out for, so F-O-U-R. And then for O, it had the block O, and then decreasing in size, the H is like 4-O.
Oh, did he? Oh, that's very good.
And at the bottom, it said, Happy Birthday, Lance, Ed Ruscha.
They bought his papers at,
yeah.
And we've got all that. And I'm thinking in Austin that we need one great museum downtown. And Robert Rauschenberg is from Texas. Mm-hmm. And I thought, what if he just did a Rauschenberg museum, or Ed Ruscha's papers are here? Now, represents obviously California mainly, but he's got a connection to the Austin culture. I think if we could do one great museum downtown, that on one artist, I think it'd make a big difference in Austin.
I think, we're getting some scene. The contemporary has found its stride, I think. We're in Austin. This isn't New York City or Chicago or San Francisco or Los Angeles. But there's great art here and great collectors, great collections. And the Blanton's that was a serious move. And Ed loves Austin.
I know.
Like when he came to do the initial event, he loves this. There's this kind of dumpy Tex-Mex place that he loves over on Old Torf. And me and him and a few others went over there, and I thought, Jesus, we can do better than this.
No, I know.
It was.
He's one of the best great American artists of our time, and history is going to treat him very, very well.
I think so. Yeah. I hope he's very prolific, like you.
I was mentioning the museum possibility. Have you ever thought about if a major league sports team would ever come to Austin, like I was in Columbus. I went to Ohio State. They have the Blue Jackets, NHL in Columbus downtown. And do you think Austin can absorb an NBA team or Major League Baseball or hockey or something?
I think the most logical would probably be MLS, which Columbus has as well.
Yeah.
I could see soccer working really well here. I don't know that football's out of the question, right? With Jerry's world. I mean, he's not going to allow I think San Antonio made a run at the Raiders and tried to build that stadium somewhere between San Antonio and Austin, like in New Braunfels, for example, and that didn't happen. We got 3 NBA teams. I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, look, could it work? Possibly. Should F1 have worked here? And arguably hasn't. Austinites have a lot of options. It's whether it's their own interests exercising or live music, or there's just a lot. I don't want to call it distraction, but could that? And then you layer in the university, which obviously pulls a ton of attention and a ton of sports fans. But even then, you see attendance at some of the football games.
Yeah, you know what I miss? I'm traveling around, Lance. I gave a speech down in Memphis. I gave one at Tulsa. And you see these minor league ballparks that are right downtown, and having the team out in Round Rock. I go to the minor league games, but I keep fantasizing it'd be neat if it was right downtown.
Yeah.
And it's because I go downtown all the time, but there's nothing like that to do. But otherwise than that, I love it here. And I'm getting back out on kayak and around Zilker, but with all the floodwaters, they had shut that sucker down.
Let's stay out of that water for just a minute. Speaking of ballparks, because I know you worked with Bob Dylan, and he's been he's done a lot of touring in and around minor league ballparks, and then we did some stuff with Willie and but with Dylan, that's got to be just next level. I mean, nobody hangs out with Bob Dylan.
Well, I'm actually seeing Dylan play in the Toledo Zoo next Wednesday with Mavis Staples warming him up. But I got to do, Jan Wenner, the publisher of Rolling Stone, is a bit of a friend of mine. I saw him for lunch recently. And I was bugging him that I wanted to do a Dylan interview for Rolling Stone, a cover story.
Yep.
And eventually I got the gig and went over to Paris. And when I went to see Bob's show, and I was sitting there, and when he was doing his encores, some guy from Columbia Records tapped me, brought me back to the green room to do a little bit of hang after the show. And I got in there, and Dylan was going with Sarkozy was there, and he was going, Bob was kind of like a nod and a wink, because he knows I was going to be writing about him. And he goes, Professor Brinkley, the Sarkozy, and he's, I don't like the euro, and he wants, I'm telling him I don't think the currency's good. I miss the faces on the old currency, like the old time. And Sarkozy's like, well, Mr. Dylan, the world goes. It was a surreal little moment. And I made a pitch to go on the bus with Dylan, which I know he doesn't let writers do. Right. He said, nah, he goes, look, come to Amsterdam, playing 3 nights straight in Heineken Arena, and then we'll kick back afterwards in my hotel suite. And it worked. I first started with only an hour, and I only talked about Duluth and Minnesota with him, and then the knock on the door, your hour, and he goes, oh, we're going to continue. This is fine. We'll continue. Right. And then we went on for a while, and then the next night went on. So it became a great thing, and I once in a while get a rare opportunity to see him. I go see him in a show a lot. I was with my kids up in Saratoga Springs up in New York when he was playing up there, and I called his manager Jeff Rosen, and I said, Jeff, I bought tickets, not looking for and I'll be there with my kids, but I'd love to say hi to Bob. And he said, Doug, he's not doing hospitality right now. A little bit later, I got the call, go meet him in his bus, and he was parked in a state park, and we pulled out 2 chairs, and he had pulled out and a bottle of Pellegrino for us to share, and just started chatting about history. My big takeaway always with him is his love of the Civil War, his deep concern about Native American history issues. And he would sometimes ask something about a massacre in American history, Native Americans, that I didn't know quite enough about, and he would always be very kind and go, "No, well, let me get you something." One time he sent me back into his bus where he lives on this bus, and brought back a folder of Native American, stuff that he's been collecting. And I think, Lance, people don't realize just how deeply interested in history he is. It's like, in fact, when I once said it, that I said, "Bob, thanks for giving." He goes, "Well, you're not a newsy person." He goes, "History is a trade. You're like a tradesman, and that's like like a plumber, electrician, historian. I like that. I don't like those, the news beast out there." Right. And so I'm keep digging on stuff. I was looking at a diary that he kept not long ago, and I keep dealing with some unpublished stuff, unusual things, and trying to eventually write a major biography of him, but without any timetable. I'm not putting that pressure on myself for when it's due or anything.
But you're already writing it.
I'm writing it.
I mean, that's the thing. Like you write things. I don't write anything, but I would imagine that that's a process. So he may not know it. You may not necessarily, a publisher may not know, but or maybe you do know it. You're.
I will eventually,
and it could be nothing
if I live long. Exactly.
Yeah,
that's the key thing.
But
you got it. It takes a while, and so the question I'm sure you've gotten asked the same question over and over. People always ask me, how long does it take you to write a book? Right. It's like, well, I've been vibing on Dylan since childhood. I'm not exaggerating. I've been to 30, 40 of his shows. I've listened to the bootlegs. And I did do a cover story on Rolling Stone on him, and I've done a couple tangential pieces, but I'm trying to gear up to do a large one. But I also, right now, I'm writing some on jazz, and I've been working on a guy named Albert Murray, who was a friend of mine. He lived in Harlem. Was Ralph Ellison, who wrote Invisible Man's Best Friend, a close friend, and more to the point, is I think the best writer on the blues and jazz. Right. So, I'm doing a little work on Albert Murray in Harlem, and he went to Tuskegee and all. I'm really beginning into Count Basie and Duke Ellington, and that's high watermark for me. That Duke Ellington, now that I'm listening to him, I thought, it's like big band music. Yeah, who doesn't like Duke Ellington? But when you really see that he wrote these hundreds and thousands of compositions, he's a lot like Dylan, Duke Ellington. He's a survivor. He has resilience and knows how to improvise and to survive our culture.
And so when you meet Bob Dylan, just to go back to him, like the first time I guess it was that show in Paris. Were you nervous?
Yes.
I only asked because
only for him.
Most
usually I'm not too nervous. I did once see him in Portland briefly, but before that, wasn't so much nervous, except like he makes you feel pretty comfortable. He's a pro. I brought with me a book of his on his drawings.
Interesting.
And I wanted to get an autograph of it because I know he doesn't like the photos or selfie. And I walked in with the book, and he said, "You want me to sign that?" Great. Like he knows that's why. He's
like Justin Bieber. I mean, no more selfies.
Selfies are.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, it gets to be a little bit much. I mean, I think he likes doing those, Dylan, with people that he knows or somebody that's a family member, child of an old friend. That's a whole different ballgame than just.
But he doesn't.
He's different than Willie that way, though. I know you're close to Willie Nelson. Willie he's got that karma of being able to give that kind of energy.
Willie's just so laid back.
Yeah.
Especially at this point in his life. I mean, he's just super chill. And even when we're with him, because I mean, when you're with Willie, like you got to tell the stories and you got to document a little bit just because he's Willie. And I'm always like, Willie, can we get our picture? I always feel like kind of a dumbass when but he's just such a sweetheart that it's all good. But that's the thing about you is it seems like, whether it's Bob Dylan when you were supposed to have an hour and I don't know, maybe ended up doing 2 or 3 or more hours. But that's and I, you and me, I think have had this relationship. You're just one of these guys that people just find fascinating and interesting and want to hear stories, whether it's Dylan or Hunter Thompson or Sean Penn. I mean, I know you guys struck up a quick relationship during Katrina. I think he sought you out when he decided to go down there and take things into his own hands, for lack of a better terminology. But yeah, I mean, and all these guys you've written about who are dead, former presidents,
they all have families.
Yeah, and they would have liked to hang out and chill. And
I'm going this Friday to Kennedy compound in Hyannis to talk on environmentalism with a whole family out there for Friday. 2 nights I'm spending out there in Hyannis, and then next year will be the 100th birthday of John F. Kennedy.
Oh, wow.
So I'm trying to work with the Presidential Library of JFK to do a kind of coffee table book or something to commemorate 100 years of JFK, So you get around. The big thing is not to burn people. Yep. Nobody wants to be burned, and you've got to be open-hearted. And then if you bring history to the table, you'd be amazed that people love talking about literature, music, history. And if you can leave, instead of you trying to grab something on an interview, if you can leave them with a bit of something they didn't think about before, then it's like a trade-off. You want it to be like fair. Shauna is a big fan of yours, as you know, and you guys are great friends. And he's a lot like you. He's strong and very individualistic and does with his own thing and makes his own ways. And I went with my wife Ann and my kids to Sean's at Christmas in Malibu. And
this past Christmas?
This past Christmas, I spoke at Tiki Torches in his backyard on Andrew Jackson, because Sean's going to play Andrew Jackson for HBO.
Oh, interesting.
And he's deeply reading him, and also the idea was I would come and do an hour lecture on Andrew Jackson. And he said, I'm going to have some of the people from the company come. And it's like, okay.
And you can just, Andrew Jackson, I'm going to talk for an hour.
Because I'm a professor at Rice University. I teach presidential history, and I've been doing for years my Jackson lecture. I amplified it a little because of that.
Well, you were in Hollywood. I mean, it's got to be amplified.
I had to make it the storytelling had to be snappier.
You had to.
So I came up there, and suddenly at Sean's place, he has at his home there. It's like, okay, I thought it was like a little crew of the HBO people, but then for my lecture, and then Sean there's Leonardo DiCaprio, and then on the other side's Tom Petty, and he's got this on and on of these people. And then I started getting nervous. That's when I was like, all right, I better have an extra drink here. I got this because standing outdoors at night with tiki torches in Hollywood doing an hour on Andrew Jackson with all those eyes like kind of pointed at you, it's like that kind of thing gets me a little scared. But I like that Sean is willing to put me in the mix. He's like, yeah, come on, we're out here in Malibu. We're hungry to hear about Andrew Jackson or presidential history. So once you give that hour about Jackson, you get a lot of feedback from other people, because they've got their craft or art. Yeah.
I tell you, Sean is you mentioned, I mean, we are very close, but he's just, and look, we all know this. I mean, it's no secret. My life has been a bit crazy for the 44 years I've been here, but it's been really crazy the last 4. But what I love about Sean is he's just one of those guys that's just there. He's always there for you. He leans in when times are tough, and guys like that. You just get sort of random, input from. You're like, whoa, out of blue, some,
deeply loyal guy.
Yeah, very.
So's Willie Nelson,
and so's Willie. But Willie's been through plenty of hard times.
Yeah,
I mean, Willie knows. I was way too young to relate to what went on with him 30, 40 years ago with the IRS, and I mean, that was, people didn't think Willie Nelson was going to come back from that. Speaking of Willie, I mean, I would love, this is our second episode, but that's a guy that I would just love to sit and I'm almost too close to him to say, it would be awkward doing a podcast with a very close friend, but a guy that, and imagine the stories he could tell.
Oh, he'll do that. You could go to the bus. You have to go to the bus when it's around sometime, but just do it on the bus.
I've been on the bus. That's a good place to be.
A good place to be, and he'll let you do it. I think
partake a little.
I thought when Prince died. Oh yeah, and I thought about when Prince died. Don't go making news here, Lance.
Oh yeah. At this point, fuck it. There is no news at this point, unless
when Prince died, I thought, God, if we lose Willie Nelson, it's not and when Merle Haggard died, I was thinking, God, they don't make them anymore. So lately, they just brought out the Highwaymen live, which was Chris Christopherson and Waylon and Willie and Johnny Cash. And I had listened to the Highwaymen albums, but they just reissued their live concerts, live performances. It was great fun to listen to. I highly recommend it, just not for daily listening, but to give it one good listen. Those four distinct voices working together.
He was very just before Merle died. What Willie will do is he'll email me, and he's a prolific emailer. Like he loves it. He just, if you email him back, he emails you right back again. So he's on it like he's a kid on Snapchat or something. But he's got this little 9-hole golf course out there in Spicewood. So I'll go out and play with him. And I was with him just days before Merle died, and I asked about Merle because a group of us went down to his Arlen Studios to see Willie and Merle play. Obviously the last time they played together in Austin. So I knew they were close. That was back on the bus with them that night as well, which is a whole nother story. But he was just interesting to hear Willie try to process cancer, and the way he said, he told me, he said, Merle's sick. I said, I didn't know that. And he said, yeah, he's got some kind of cancer, I think lung cancer. I mean, just not even really connecting to it, but not like if you or I talk about, I mean, so for those guys, it's like, oh, he's sick. And then he said, but I think he said they thought they had it, and now it's come back. And it was just a matter of days after that he had passed. And I know he was rocked by his passing.
I had my first, it was a nothing thing with cancer, but I went to a dermatologist because I had a little thing on my forehead, and they said, "Oh, that looks cancerous." I was like, and then you have to wait to see whether it's melanoma or not, and it wasn't, and so it's just nothing. It's just a few stitches did it, but just hearing the C word in my life, the C word, right. it really kind of threw my sense of mortality out the window and started making me feel like, geez, take and it can happen to you anytime.
Yeah.
Well, something worse.
Hundreds of thousands of people a day hear that, or a year. You know, it's heavy, but knock on wood, we're still here. You and me both. How do you pump out this much work? I mean, and not just, it would be one thing if you were, doing a bunch of kids' books, but this much work that's that deep. Well, it must be daunting.
Well, you know what it is? When I was young, I wanted to be a historian, so I never had a career decision. That's unusual, meaning I was 8, 9, 10, 11 years. I'm going to be a historian. I'm going to write history. So it's my love and
so
passion.
When you tell your parents at 8 years old, like if my son, he's 7, if he rolled in and said, I'm going to be a historian.
I had a father who taught social studies and a mother who taught English. They were in high school. We went all over on trailers around the country. So by the time I went to college, Ohio State, by the time I'm 17, I had been to most of the national parks in the lower 48, but I've been to Harry Truman's Independence in Willa Cather's, Nebraska, and Auburn Avenue in Atlanta, Martin Luther King, and Boston, Paul Revere's grave in Boston. And my hobby as a boy was taking photographs of graves of the famous American people. So we would go my sister liked Disney World and the beaches and all. I became a bit of a history nerd. So when I went to Ohio State, I was partying a lot. I was drinking and, but I always got A's in history. Right. And so then I went on. But the biggest thing was I started working in rare and used books. And I've also developed a bit of an ability to speed read. Nobody asks me how much I read. They think about how much you write, but in order to write that much, you have to read a lot. So as you and I were commenting before the podcast about my old-fashioned phone and how I don't do electronics and things, what I do is speed read. I can go through 2 books today of serious import in one day. I have a particular skill, like an athlete might or a musician or something, and I just perfect that skill all the time. So once I've got my first book done and a second book done and a third book done, I understand the mechanism of it. I understand how to do it, how to arrange it. So the big challenge for me is not writing. We'll talk about Hunter Thompson in a minute, but Hunter used to have a sign up on his place called "No pages equals bad day." Wow. So if I don't get some pages written, I can get in a bad mood because I've become almost addicted to doing some pages every day. It's like a workout.
It's like exercise. It's for me.
It
is. It's
Yeah. So
you
and
go
it
a
can
couple
be
days without working out,
I don't
and
like
all
it.
of a sudden, the whole room is miserable because
I
you're just
start losing my sense of self. I mean, or like, what am I doing? So it's actually maybe so I'm happy writing,
Yeah.
and I'm not happy, however, and why I'm not happy with publishing world in the sense of once the book's done, you got to get behind it, you got to make sure there are errors in it, you got to suffer reviews, you've got to go. That part of it is I can probably, as I get older, do without, but the act of writing is just fun for me. So and people I know the books, Lance, I haven't written.
Yeah.
I've always wanted to do a biography of Cesar Chavez, but I don't think I'll be able to do it because I'm 56 now and I have all these other ones I want to do. That takes an intense look, Chavez, but we need a good biography of him. I have a whole list. 10 days ago, I was in Jamestown and in Yorktown, Virginia, early American history. And I recognized when I was on William and Mary's campus, I'm at the age now I'm never going to write on American Revolution. When I was a boy, I wanted to write on the American Revolution. So there's a finite amount left of what I can do. So I have to choose a little more carefully what I'm going to write about. When I was a younger man, I just would go out, follow my curiosity and take it to the conclusion. Larry McMurtry does that a lot, and he's a rare antiquarian book guy.
So it's interesting. I mean, it sounds and I have these conversations a lot with people in the sense that preparing for an athletic event, a bike race, the tour, whatever we want to call it, it's the best part. The only good part for me was the process. So the build, the process, the training, the alone time, the suffering. That's the reason that I did all those things. Then you'd get to the actual event, right? So you would get to the actual moment the book is published. You've got to do a book tour. You got to do media tours, all this bullshit. And so I called it that. You didn't call it that. And that's the part where you're like, wait, I just want to go back to my room and bang out a few pages.
You got it.
And so that was the thing that I always loved about cycling was that was the those long, lonely hours where you're just suffering, and then you get to that event, you're like, oh my God, what are all these people doing here? They're on these roads that a month ago I was the only one here, and I get it. That's the job, but I guess what I'm saying is I relate exactly to what you're talking about in terms of the process of writing a book.
And that's unique because not everybody likes to suffer with the training. They want to hit the 3-point jump shot.
Yeah.
And not everybody wants the book party. I actually enjoy the process, and that allows me to be more productive because I'm addicted to the process, not the squabbling over the book once it comes out or the praise.
That's right. The praise, I'm going to venture to guess, might even be uncomfortable at times.
It is.
We read those things and you just, because that the next one, they might say something totally different.
And also that old Japanese adage, but many cultures have it, the nail that stands the tallest gets hammered down.
Sure.
So
I can't imagine.
You get too much success. If my book gets too hot on a book, it's like, some jerk's going to come out of the woodwork now because I've gotten to. And that kind of gamesmanship you have to play sometimes almost makes me want to deal on more obscure topics because you don't have that. If you're going to play, you want to play with on kinetic topics, you got to look out because people will come after you with tomahawks. And then I saw my late colleague, Stephen Ambrose, get busted for plagiarism. And it was. But
he was your mentor? He
was kind of a mentor, and he was a friend more than a mentor. But he was somebody wrote best-selling books, and I watched when they found a weakness in his scholarship. I watched the pack rip Steve down. He died of cancer like a year after, so he didn't get to rehabilitate his career. And I thought to myself,
was he sick? Was he sick
caught with plagiarism?
Right, was he sick? Well, the same with the guy, the CNN guy.
Fareed Zakaria had that in him. Yeah.
So was he sick before the plagiarism claims?
I think it destroyed his immune system.
You wonder, right? I mean, you see that.
I saw him deteriorate from it rapidly.
You see that, and I mean, you saw that with Joe Paterno. I mean, here you have an older man. I mean, who knows, right? But not sick before, and then an event like this comes along in their lives, and it just breaks them down, and that's sad.
It was very sad, and I I remember I was living in New Orleans and Steve was living out in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, and I felt so terrible for him. But a woman named Susan Larson ignored this plagiarism charge and wrote a beautiful piece about Steve Ambrose's building of the World War II Museum in New Orleans. Beautiful piece, didn't even deal with plagiarism. So I got on my truck and I rushed out to Bay St. Louis and say, Steve, look, this great, I wanted to physically be bringing the good news. He was laying on a sofa with a bucket, just like vomiting because he had been, the chemo had gotten and he had shrunk. And I saw him there. I wanted him to know, I knew he didn't have long, that the rehabilitation was starting. David Gergen gave him a rehabilitation branch on McNeil Lehrer NewsHour also, but he didn't have the extra years to kind of have his be the comeback kid with a follow-up book from the tragedy.
Let's, I want to talk about just a couple of Colorado things, just because it's summertime and we're up in Colorado, although we're not in Colorado at the time being. We're actually here in Austin at our home, like a little, we don't even have a studio, to be honest. This is we're just making this shit up as we go along. So we did it down here, but
it works. It's pretty good acoustics and it's cool.
Yeah. And it would work if you had a house full of kids even. I mean, they wouldn't interrupt us. No, but I was, a couple things, these are totally different and disconnected, is I would like for you to clarify, because there's a hotel down valley from Aspen in Glenwood Springs called Hotel Colorado, which, as you probably know, Theodore Roosevelt spent a lot of time there. And there's the story of the origin of the teddy bear and how that came to be. But if you look up teddy bear or Wikipedia or whatever, there's another version of Roosevelt out on a bear hunt and can't get the bear hunt in Mississippi, which I didn't even know they had bears in Mississippi. They certainly don't anymore.
Well, it's an interesting story. Mississippi is the birthplace of the teddy bear. Colorado, it's a bit of a folklore out there, but he did go
Hotel
out there.
Colorado, I think, has a different version
of it. Yeah. They do. But the original with the story occurred, because I wrote a book on Theodore Roosevelt on conservation called The Wilderness Warrior. But there was a man, it's a fascinating story. I'll tell as quickly as I can. But Theodore Roosevelt, William McKinley was killed and assassinated in Buffalo.
Right. Suddenly,
Vice President Theodore Roosevelt sworn in, haphazard session, the only president not to take the oath with his hand on a Bible, Theodore Roosevelt in Buffalo. He comes in, he's president in 1901 to 1909. But one of the first things he does is invite Booker T. Washington to the White House. First time an African-American was invited to dine with the president in the White House.
Wow.
And Governor Vardman of Mississippi, the biggest bigot, racist you can imagine, started using the N-word in articles. Theodore Roosevelt voted Booker T, and he had him sit next to his wife. And so horrible stuff, Lance, you can't believe it. So TR's solution was to go bear hunting in Vardman's backyard with a man named Holt Collier, an African-American bear hunter, who had all these, the bear claws and all, like the old style. But TR and this African-American Holt Collier, and today there's a Holt Collier National Wildlife Refuge in Mississippi named after him. They went looking for a bear. Now, cartoonists were big back then, and he had a cartoonist along with him, Theodore Roosevelt, for the bear hunt named Clifford Berryman. And also in Mississippi, they were lynching black people all the time. And Theodore Roosevelt was pushing for federal anti-lynching in Mississippi in the South. He was also wanting fair chase hunting, that if you're going to go after an animal, you can't do mass slaughter, market hunting. You've got to be one man, a couple bullets, and the real chase.
Yeah, fair fight.
Fair fight.
Yeah.
And so he goes down there, and Holt Collier, it was a little rainy out there, and the cane breaks and the Delta. Holt Collier bugles, he had roped a black bear. And TR came and saw it, and he wanted Roosevelt to shoot it so he'd have his trophy bear. And that's when TR said, no, I'm not, that's not fair hunting. I'd rather come up empty-handed on my hunt than shoot a bear like that. Well, that cartoonist, Clifford Berryman, drew a cartoon called Drawing the Line in Mississippi in the Washington Post and showed it Theodore Roosevelt with his hand out. And the drawing the line, it had the bear with the rope around its neck like it was a black person about to be hung. But it also looked like a bear. So that cartoon was a double meaning. Fair chase hunting, conservation, and the need for no lynching.
Right.
Once they ran in the newspaper in Washington Post, a woman in Brooklyn wrote, "Dear Mr. President, I'd like to make a stuffed toy, named after you." And he basically said, "Madam, you can, but who cares?" Well, now she made it, and the teddy bear became the most ubiquitous toy in world history. And I had to realize as a historian, you think it's easy to be a politician and president where kids have teddy bears running after you. William Howard Taft tried to do it and created the Billy Possum toy. Nobody's ever heard of Billy Possum. No. Try to go find one on eBay, if you have beady eyes. And the point being, T.R. had a kind of magic about him. And largely he had learned to win over the cartoonist of his day, and won over the reporters and journalists of his day, because he'd invite them to the White House all the time. And T.R. also learned the trick to media was tell every reporter how great their last piece was. Oh, wow. What a magnificent article you wrote. Because that would stoke the reporters' egos that they were that good.
And
and then they didn't turn on him.
And it's we had this last week with Tim, where he made some remark, and it's like this shit you pick up. That why didn't I think of stuff like that? Whereas, what you said about Teddy Roosevelt, to say he probably thought the article was terrible.
Well, right.
But he gives them that compliment. Yes. They think, oh my God,
Reagan did that.
I should have done a little of that.
Yeah, maybe. Reagan used to hold press conferences. I've interviewed the photographers that all shot Reagan, and these liberal journalists. And they never have an axe to grind like they did about Nixon, about Reagan. I've interviewed a couple who say, well, you know what? When we go out to Santa Barbara, Reagan would say, I'm not going to be outside for 4 hours. Best place to have Mexican food is this little place. I'll let you know when you can get the super lens photo. You guys got to chill out a little. And then also, even when he'd have tense press conferences, when they'd see him afterwards, he'd be, did you guys get there's a donut table? There's free coffee out there. He humanized the reporters in a positive way, even though what you may have saw on television looked confrontational. Once off stage, he would kind of be one of the boys. Right. And that style works pretty well. You can never have a war with the press. You can't take them on. It's not that they have more ink by the barrel, but all the cliches about it.
I don't know. I think at this point in our
oh, now it's different.
Yeah, I think it's very. I mean, at this point now
it is.
If you asked Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump or they're all at war with the press at varying degrees, and that crosses over to entertainment and sports and
also when I wrote on Walter Cronkite, when he left CBS in 1981, he had a journalist had a 60-70% approval rating.
Yeah.
81. They're down to 10% or something now. The public's angry at journalists for all the irresponsible journalism and stuff out there. And so they're not beloved anymore. So they are a target for Trump or Hillary Clinton, but particularly Trump's made them their
let's get to Trump in a minute. But speaking of journalists and still with the Colorado, I want to talk about Hunter. Because Hunter is not anybody that I knew. I missed my time in Aspen, or his time and my time. We didn't cross over, but I feel so connected to him as a figure through his friends, through Sheriff Brodus, Sheriff DeSalvo, many others that still live in Aspen, Woody Creek, hang around the golf course where DeSalvo and I play golf almost every day. How did you enter into that? I can only imagine how you entered into his vortex, but
I think it was 1992, 93. I would do these magic bus trips.
So you did magic bus, and the first one was 93?
93. Right. And I went out.
How many kids were on that?
17 started, but by the time I ended it, I had 2 natural gas run buses with students from all over the country, 27, 28, went all the way up to Alaska. Yep. But when we drive through, the point was to read, like my family vacations, read classic books. So we would read Death of a Salesman and meet with Arthur Miller, or we'd read, Ken Kesey's One for the Cuckoo's Nest, meet with Kesey. And when we went to Woody Creek, due to friendships of a number of people, George Kearns Goodwin and others, they hooked me up with Hunter. And I brought the bus there. Well, he loved that, a magic bus. Oh, yeah. Basically college on the road.
He was trying to get a bunk.
Yeah, but he was.
He was. I don't know that, but I can just see him
we
going.
We pulled in Woody Creek Tavern. He always he said to me,
"Hey, Doug, you got another bunk."
He's like, you have he applauded me for, you've contained the anarchy, because I was in charge, but I didn't act like I was in charge. And he noticed my interaction with the students. But we went up to Al Farm, his house, and instead of autographing the books like all the other writers did, he would autograph some, but for others, he would line it up against a tree and shoot it, and put this giant hole through Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. And a lot of the kids really thought it was great. Well, to shorten the story, he was working on a book called Better Than Sex about the Clinton era. And he had a woman friend that he was living with, and they were looking for somebody to help pull it together. And I thought, this is, I'm not sure. But I ended up in Miami at a book party that Larry King threw of CNN, which was a Hawaiian themed party in Miami. And I remember having a couple of gin and tonics there and thinking, this doesn't feel right. If this is the book world, and I said, if Hunter was here, the cake would be falling, the bull carrying his own china shop around. And that night I talked to Hunter on the phone. I said, all right, I'm going to come out and let's work out at Woody Creek. I'm going to come help you with this. And we did. And
with Better Than Sex.
Better Than Sex. But that led to, this was an uneven work of his, and he needed to fulfill his advance money for Simon and Schuster or Random House. It was Simon and Schuster. And the bottom line is he kept his archive, and unusually he was a kind of a pack rat, saved everything. And so we then brought out a book called Fear and Loathing in America about his letters, and then also an early childhood letters called The Proud Highway. These got very big reviews. I mean, Christopher Buckley covered the New York Times book review kind of stuff. And it made people realize that Hunter wasn't just a Doonesbury character, that he was a major American writer that invented gonzo journalism, and that it had a voice that people cared about and that mattered, and actually wrote 3 classic books, Hell's Angels, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and Fear and Loathing in the Campaign Trail 72. Then the other big honor came
which Gibney covered pretty well.
Gibney covers well, and I gave Gibney archival material for all that.
And you make some cameos in there.
Make some cameos in there. And
younger version.
Younger me. But
what state
buddies.
was
became great
in
friends.
the early 90s? What state would he have, because he got pretty...
He was depressed when I first met him because he was at that age in life where he felt his best work was behind him, and now it was sort of marketing the persona. What I brought to the table, I feel, and I know he felt, was just a younger scholar taking him seriously. I had done a book on Dean Acheson, Secretary of State, and all this, and I'm saying Hunter influenced me when I was young, but I was the right age. A previous generation had Hemingway and Faulkner and Fitzgerald. When I went to Ohio State in 1978, 79, we were all reading Hunter Thompson, Jack Kerouac, Charles Bukowski, guys, those were big writers. And so it was a kind of a generational imperative for me to kind of give Hunter a bit of a boost, and it worked, and he appreciated that. But also when you read somebody's correspondence like I did, you become very close, because I'll say, well, who's this girlfriend? And who's this? And suddenly you're being the biographer. So when he committed suicide, I'm in the will to be his authorized biographer. And I'm looking for the moment when I could write that. But like we were talking about before, I've collect everything, have everything. And it may be in 2017. I'm sorry, Lance, 2021 would be the 50th anniversary of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. So that would 50 be years.
2021.
Yeah, and to give people a chance to
imagine Hunter. If Hunter, he died, 11 years ago, 2005?
67.
Imagine if he's alive today and he's seeing, you just spoke about the way the media is and is perceived, the way new media, arguably we're having a new media conversation, but the way that the news is reported. And then layer in American politics, the characters there. He would have a fucking field day with this stuff.
Yes. Yeah, unbelievable field day. And it's but he was keen when he got so famous in the 70s. By 76, when Jimmy Carter ran for president, Hunter noticed and wrote, I'm getting more people hitting me for autographs than the candidates.
Sure.
Like I'm like an astronaut
Yeah.
showing up.
Give me again in the documentary. They talk about that where he was becoming a star.
A star, and he noted, but then he worried about the celebrity news, that investigative reporting was going out the window, and it was all going to be the celebrity. The reporter was the celebrity. So today, if Anderson Cooper or Bill O'Reilly or somebody is at a political event, they're a bigger deal than a lot, not Trump or Hillary Clinton, but of a congressman or a senator. And so, they're making a ton of money, these.
But that's a different type of journey. I mean, I don't want to.
Oh, no, it is.
I don't want to, degrade or mean what, but that's different than a print journalist or, one of the.
Hunter wrote books
David
that mattered.
Brooks or a Krugman, I mean, that's just different.
Yeah, well, that's true. True enough.
I mean,
good point. But it's not easy to write classics, and Hunter pulled it off. And it just what we were talking about. It was all process. When you go in his papers, like I've done to do this, it's just work and work and work and work and work at his craft. And he scored his first big book with Hell's Angels, which holds up exceedingly well. And I recommend people listening, if they're watching, if they haven't read it, read it. It's really good.
Yeah. And they weren't big fans of that book.
No, it's now come. Yeah, no, they weren't.
At the time, at least.
Now he kept them in the mix. If he hadn't written that, they may have faded in history. But he was an insightful investigative reporter at that point in his time. He also wrote, Lance, about the NRA that's not published, a kind of fear and loathing at the NRA, which I'll talk to you about sometime. But when Bobby,
we can talk about it at dinner tonight.
Yeah, cool. We can. When Bobby Kennedy was shot in '68, Hunter was an NRA member and had to think, well, Bobby Kennedy is my hero. Yet I'm a gun owner. And he started analysis and got to go in through Ted Kennedy's office to kind of infiltrate NRA. And he wrote some very insightful things. So I'm hoping to bring that out for the public.
So as part of this, as the literary executor, I mean, or the custodian, you have all of these things.
All of Hunter's archive has been deeply now archived, and the guy who paid.
Like, by the way, where is that? Like, that's not in your garage.
No, I got copies, but it's Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp bought it all, or has it all,
and then archived it. Paid professional archives, a climate-controlled facility. But when I say archiving, I mean trying to create a cross index and boxes. It's a process to do it well. And so I think I went this year to Gonzo Fest in Louisville. And the reason I went was I felt that we're at a point now to really start looking at Hunter as a historical figure for that first decade from 2005, as you mentioned, when he was killed at 15. Everybody was talking about the suicide and Now we're starting to get a little bit removed, that we can see where his voice fits into the compendium of American literature, same as a Tom Wolfe or Norman Mailer or somebody.
And they were his contemporaries. They were again featured prominently, and I think they're doing. I don't know if they're in Louisville. The sheriffs told me this story. I don't know if they're renaming the public library for Hunter or for his mother.
They're trying to. His mother was Virginia Thompson and was a longtime librarian, and the idea would be, can we rename that library after Virginia or Virginia Ann Hunter Thompson, or at least get a bust of her in the library. So that's a work in progress. Those are the kind of things I mean by taking Hunter seriously, because of he was a gifted, Lance, like Mark Twain and others, in the gift of exaggeration.
Sure.
And that's an art form, exaggeration, but it often seems belittling to some real New York kind of critics. But Hunter used to read and tell stories about Paul Bunyan and Jesse James and Billy the Kid, and he loved Dylan's album, Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, the soundtrack from Sam Peckinpah's film that Knocking on Heaven's Door was on that. But all these songs about getting Billy the Kid. Hunter had an outlaw persona, and always.
You think?
Yeah,
I mean,
he's the ultimate, and he cultivated that.
No, I think what cultivated, I wouldn't want to say capitalized on that, but I think he reveled in that.
He did.
But all those guys did. I mean, those, even just with Brodus, who is a dear friend of mine. I mean, they were wild.
It was wild, different era. It was very wild.
Aspen was wild.
Freak Power 1970.
In that valley, I mean, between Hunter and the Eagles being there, Jimmy Buffett, you had all these wild fuckers coming through Happy Valley there.
Happy Valley. It was a bit of a counterculture hub, and a different breed, a little outdoorsy and all that. That's left there now. I don't find, you would know better. I don't know, meaning I don't think Aspen is what it once was in that regard. It's a different place now.
No, I mean, Hunter would go to the golf course and he would stand on the driving range. He liked to play golf, but he'd take his shotgun out to the driving range and have his buddies hit balls, almost like it was skeet. So he was, okay, hit an 8-iron. And he would fucking sit there and shoot this. The golf course is right in the middle of town.
Yes.
He's shooting his shotgun into the air right in the middle of town, trying to knock down his buddies' pitching wedges.
You got it, but you also got that he was great friends with the sheriff.
Yeah.
And one of the most embarrassing thing I ever found out about Hunter that he got very sheepish about is I did investigation to find out his record, like how many times he's been busted or something.
Sure.
I'm writing about him. And I found out, like, I got through the sheriff's office and all Pitkin County and all that he's had like a squeaky clean record. It's like, how? Now the FBI raided his compound, his home once, but he didn't get busted for that. He got let off for it. So he never did. And he had a jail time when he was a young boy in Louisville, when as a minor, and got into this weird little scenario there. But as an adult for the 60s and 70s, he knew how to do outrageous stunts like that and not get busted. That's an art, and he always had cased the room. He knew what was going on, so he could smell a narc from a mile away, or somebody not to trust, or somebody.
And there were a lot of them.
A lot of them.
I mean, you just hear the stories you hear about the narcs in Aspen in that generation.
After him, he was the trophy.
Yeah. And yes,
that's why he got Doberman dogs up there to protect it and called it a fortified compound. And he got very libertarian. Get on my property, I'll shoot you. It was a defense mechanism because at any moment he was worried about the law.
Yeah, I talked to Brodus today. I mentioned to him that we were going to chat, and I was looking. I'm new at this business, but I thought maybe Brodus would have a good Doug Brinkley story or two, and he didn't give any up, but he did say, he said that Hunter loved Doug, loved him, and so that's we
became really close, Lance Hunter and I. I became exceedingly close to him.
Clearly, and probably somebody that was not very easy to be close to. I mean, I hear more about Hunter through Sheriff DeSalvo. But also a man who was tough. I mean, he was tough on his friends. I mean, another good friend of mine, Jerry Goldstein from San Antonio, that lives in a little area of Aspen called Oklahoma Flats, was his lawyer. And I mean, Hunter would just be ruthless. Like he'd be sitting around chilling up at Hunter's place, and he would just be demeaning and fucking outright mean. Yes. And these guys just taking it.
Yeah, he could get, and I saw that side of him. But, he was smart. He was really smart, very well read. And you could, beyond the outrageous antics, you could talk to him for an hour, just his sober talking on politics, culture, stunning. And the amount of things that he read. People, again, underestimate how much Hunter read.
He's a speed reader.
That's
why you guys hit it off.
It is. We both talk about books.
Were there sober moments?
He was never fully sober.
3 p.m. when he woke up.
When he woke up, and but there were there's degrees of sobriety. So right. But he was.
He would have moments where he thought, okay, I got to slow down.
Oh, I go to bed. That's one of the reasons I was a friend. I'm good night. I'm going. He never did the wimp. You got to hang out, because in a way I was dealing with his papers and all of that he want. You don't want an accountant who's sloppy, right? You don't want to. So I was the scholar. I was professor scholar. So I wouldn't partake in a lot, and I'd say, here's my limit. It's 1 a.m. or 2, and I'm going to bed. It's just getting too much. And over that, he appreciated that, because he got suspicious of people that wanted to be good time Charlies all the time, because all these people wanted to party with him. Yeah. And, he was like, I'm at the point I'm trying to carve my legacy piece. I'm not interested in partying my brains out. So he likes the straight if he's the comedian in the room, you needed to be the straight man with Hunter.
So you never partied with him?
No, we partied, but but I did it under my way.
Yeah.
I didn't fall under his sway. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
But there's a whole group of people up there in Aspen and Woody Creek that have remained great friends. You just named a few of them, but it's a big part of. I have a Hunter ring in my tree. He was a big part of my life. Think about him a lot.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people miss him. What about? I was looking just because in knowing we were going to talk, I sort of scoured the internet and I came across this fight. Right. I mean, it seemed like a fight to me with this representative from Alaska, Don Young, that was just knowing you like I know you, which isn't great, but is not a little. Just classic Brinkley, where this guy is trying to get. I mean, clearly not up on who you were or what you were there to talk about.
That's right. Well, I went with a guy named Tom Campion who owns Zoomies, the men's boys wear. It's like skateboard products. He lives up in Seattle, and he's been trying to get further protection for the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So I went camping with Tom. He had a great outdoor back, the real deal. And we went up there, and I saw the caribou herd, and it's spectacularly beautiful, and the eagles, and it was amazing. And so I went and testified on Capitol Hill that we needed to have a further layer of protection in the Arctic Refuge to stop oil drilling.
Right.
Now, the Arctic ANWR, as they call it, was founded in 1960 by Dwight Eisenhower. Nobody minded it being a wildlife refuge till 1968 when oil was found. And now it's become a very hot political issue. So when I was going there urging President Obama to sign an executive order giving permanent protection as a national monument, which is stronger than a wildlife refuge, Congressman Young is the representative of Arctic Alaska. And he has spent his entire career telling constituents, we're going to drill. We're going to get in there. That was Sarah Palin's drill, baby, drill. Get into that piece of Alaska. So I was there. Well, he called me because I'm a professor at Rice University, Dr. Rice, not Brinkley. And I then wanted to correct the record because I was seeing the transcript in my head. And I don't want to see Dr. Rice. And I also secretly was I hated the guy, Lance. I loathed him.
By the way, it was obvious.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But I also was trying to, Dr. Rice, 5 times Dr. Rice. It's embarrassing transcript. So I said, it's Brinkley. And then he said, you shut up. I never talked to it. And people can pull it up if they want. And I was just ready to fire back. So we got into a very big deal and going back and forth. And so I left, and I was like, "Yipes! What is, it was?" And everybody that my team,
they said the other representative, we're going to ask you to leave if you don't. It's not nobody asked you to talk.
Me, and it became a very, and so I left, and wow, that just happened to me. And I called home and all, and I explained it, and then my wife was a little bit like, "Oh, it can't be that bad." Come home, it couldn't have been that big a deal. And I thought maybe not that big. I suddenly landed to go to Rice, and my phone had exploded by people. And Brian Williams was putting on the NBC Nightly News, My Showdown, and all this. I was like, and I'll tell you, I was worried. I thought, oh God, I must be hated by Texan donors and all. I got more fan mail out of that from even conservatives who said, I don't agree with you on the issue, but you earn your spur. You told that, SOB off. You're a honorary Texan now. And I got and I realized Congress is hated. That whether you're right or left, that all of those guys that work for companies, they get drilled up there. And everybody kind of wants to tell the politician, which I told him, which is, you work for me. You're my servant. I pay your salary. And that's what we all kind of fantasize. So I lived it out. And when I was out in Telluride a couple of weeks ago, and invariably somebody comes up to me to shake my hand for telling them off. So I told my students at Rice, don't you ever do what I just did. I should have been a little more polite, but I didn't, and you live with it.
Yeah, it's probably one of those things you hear about. It's only second to are you related to David?
It is second.
How sick are you of that question?
It is. Oh, I'm very sick of it. But again, I want to correct people, but I don't want to embarrass them. The worst one on that, Lance, was So I did a book on Dean Acheson, and it was at a very suave kind of a book dinner in Park Avenue up in a penthouse.
Oh,
It was my first
swanky
book, Swanky. And I was there at the signing desk, piles of Dean Acheson books. And in line was Walter Cronkite. And I'm like, wow, I'm a kid from Ohio, and
That's cool.
Cronkite's coming to my book party, waiting in a line for me to autograph it. So I kept my eye on him. I was moving up the line. He got up there. I said, Mr. Cronkite's so good. And he's like, well, Doug, I haven't seen you since we went sailing in Cape Hatteras together.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, and I'd never been to Cape Hatteras sailing with them. And I was like, whoa. And then he started saying, now, how's your father been? And then I was like, oh, he thinks I'm David Brinkley's son, the newscaster. Well, the conundrum is, do you let him go on?
Right.
Or do you have to interrupt and embarrass him? And I chose to embarrass him. I just said, Mr. Cronkite, you got the wrong Brinkley. I never went sailing with you. I'm not related to David Brinkley. I just gave him the news. And he turned like a weird shade of red. And then he did it. He said, well, but Dean Acheson, he was quite a man.
That's hey, whatever.
He did, and I autographed it. And then I watched him. He'd go right out the door of this party. He thought he was coming to say hi to David Brinkley's son.
But then you went on to write the definitive Cronkite
I did,
book.
And I got to know him pretty well.
I was going to say, you definitely shared that story with him as you
I
sat
did.
with him. What book needs to be, you could write it or anybody could write it, but in your opinion, what book needs to be written today that isn't being written?
That's a very good question. I don't have the skill for it, but I think the way banks and fast food and franchises and corporatization has killed local culture in a lot of places. That, you go to traditional African American neighborhoods and it's all, Walmarts and Wendy's. And so there's that, where our new landmarks are turn left at the Hardee's sign and turn right at the, Chipotle, or it's, and there's some, when did this all happen? And also nobody is adequately written a popular history of the credit card. When we all start getting in debt, when does that you can never catch up to owing American Express every month, and how much more a consumer we are of buying stuff when you're just whipping out the plastic.
Makes it awfully easy.
Very easy. And we're buying stuff we don't need a lot. And that's occurring in that mid 60s, 70s period when a lot of the mom and pop culture dies. Now, I think Austin and New Orleans, places that I love, still try to fight to have mom and pop culture going on. But nevertheless, that mallization, Californication, whatever you want to call it.
Or franchisation.
Franchisation.
Yes.
And it hasn't been adequately analyzed from a historical perspective to my liking.
Yeah. And those things, I think we're unfortunately, because I hear you loud and clear, we're unfortunately probably past the point of reversing.
We are.
Just like, the arc of the media, the arc of this franchisation. I don't think we can turn back time there.
And we're looking at early Dylan or blues music or Ken Kesey we mentioned. I think in the early 60s, I used to think it was the beginning of the modern age, Technicolor. That's what now I'm seeing it was the end of the frontier. Like when Kesey took his psychedelic bus with acid and went around the further bus around. I used to think that was like LSD, the 60s, Technicolor. It really was the unsettling, the last kind of renegade act, because today you can't do it with cell phones and electronic equipment. A kind of freedom's gone where we're always documenting ourselves. I'm not bemoaning it. I'm just saying that something happened. It's different.
It's real time.
Yeah, it's all real time.
We're to that point.
Yeah.
Where God, it's depressing, and not to get into more the first podcast I did, it started out super depressing. It was the day of the shootings in Orlando. So, but the stuff people are doing on Facebook Live or on Periscope, just horrific, like real time things. And then you could have it so that, imagine the TMZs of the world, or these outlets of the world where they're going to be broadcasting well-known people just doing stupid shit live.
Yes, exactly.
Like, here is this person like stumbling down Sunset Boulevard. I don't know, man.
Different.
But plenty of people are going to go, okay, I'm going to watch this.
course.
Right. I mean, that's what.
And that's why I don't want to bemoan it so much, but I'm seeing, like we were talking about Dylan earlier, was Bob Dylan, I used to grow up thinking he was the beginning of rock, poetry and rock and all of this, that, Highway 61 album's the beginning. I think now that I'm older, I see him as the end of something. It was the end of those great blues recordings and there's a 50s, 60s, early 60s sensibility, but by the 70s, that's disappearing. And that's when these banks are buying the rock stars. Rock's now corporatized, and it just becomes a little. I like local indies. I'm big on local culture, and so
you're not gonna go to Old Chilla?
No, well, I can't. I'm speaking at Yellowstone.
How about that? I mean, and they added a second week.
Yes.
I mean,
I didn't know they added a second.
They added a second. I think that's right. They added a second week, and I mean, but just imagine your talent by. You have the Rolling Stones, you have Bob Dylan, you have Neil Young, you have The Who, you have Paul McCartney. I mean, you can
Are
just.
Are you going to go?
No.
It's a big mob scene out there, too.
Yeah. And those, yeah.
I went with you once to see Ben Harper here, where you did an event here, and
seeing Ben. So Ben is playing Red Rocks next week. So I get back to Aspen Thursday. I'm going to be in Northern California Saturday and Sunday helping a friend run a 100-mile run. Not a 100-mile ride, a 100-mile run. So I'm pacing him for miles 60 to 80. Get back on Sunday, and Ben is playing Tuesday night at Red Rocks. You ever been to Red Rocks?
I have.
I mean, it's...
my new book I wrote on FDR, I have half a chapter about the building of Red Rocks by the Civilian Conservation Corps. The CCC, unemployed men, built Red Rocks to make it blend in with nature. What great craftsmanship they did to build it like that.
Have you ever, and I'm sure I don't know if you went to research that part, but if you walk from the backstage area out to the soundboard, these guys that you just referenced, they dug this tunnel. So you go under, the first few, and it pops. I mean, it's amazing. And then in the tunnel, anybody that's ever played Red Rocks has signed it or marked it, it's
a Mecca almost at this point. But from 1933 to 42, Franklin Roosevelt employed 3.4 million men unemployed to plant 3 billion trees in America, 3 billion, all over Tree Army, and then build these kind of spots like Red Rocks or national park lodges, or in the Rockies there, the road that goes through Rocky Mountain National Park up there high, and all CCC built. A remarkable work that stands the test of time.
Yeah. So that's what
that sounds fun.
Yeah.
Seeing him, and particularly at Red Rocks, it would be amazing.
Yeah. No, you want to. That's the kind of guy or band or artist you want to see at Red Rocks.
Neil Young would be good there.
Neil Young with Willie's Sons.
Yeah, I like that album.
Yeah,
they do actually a song about box stores on that album of Neil Young criticizing anti-Starbucks. Again, I drink at Starbucks. I'm not, but I appreciate that they're making us think about a little thing. So that's a good band and Lucas Nelson is. He spends
a lot of time in Aspen.
Does he?
Yep, plays the belly up every summer.
He's very good. He's got longevity in him.
He sounds like his dad. He sings like his dad and plays like Stevie Ray.
Yeah,
I mean, he can just rip the guitar, and when he opens his mouth, you're like, holy shit.
He lives in Austin as Bill and Ruth Carter, who used to write songs for Stevie Ray and Double Trouble, and he still performs Continental Club and all. And he's one of the great songwriters. Johnny Depp's one of his good friends, and Depp played guitar on one of Bill Carter's last albums, just doing his kind of thing. But that guy can really write songs, and he's an unsung Austin musician worth checking out.
And when Depp did Fear and Loathing, I mean, he went full method. Like he moved in with Hunter. So it was just
full method. I was there for all that when he was going full method and became friends.
Blow by blow, every sub that is crazy.
It was crazy.
That would change it. Like you would not. I wouldn't recover from that.
Well, Johnny will tell you. He's told me that he's had trouble getting rid of the Hunter voice sometimes because he's got that. Bill Murray did where the Buffalo roam and played a Hunter Thompson the Thompson figure, and Depp what Bill Murray told Depp, be careful, you get in that hunter persona, it becomes your persona, because it's a way of looking at the world, and then you get the mannerisms. And so I sometimes see Depp performances and I recognize little hunter traits that are still lingering.
Flashbacks.
Yes, there are there.
Huh. All right, well, we got a couple more minutes, but I want to two other things. Donald Trump. I mean, what do you? To me, it's just so hard to wrap my brain around this phenomenon. And I mean, I guess on one hand, I get it because you have these non-career politicians, which we talked about Reagan, but which I think people liked about him, that he was an actor, or he was perceived as a normal person in some way. And so here this decision that we're all faced in this next election is.
Well, Trump is, in my mind, a combo of things. One is he is what a lot of people say, kind of a P.T. Barnum showman. But he's also more troublesomely has a George Wallace kind of populist, racist ideology behind him. I don't think he thinks of himself as being racist, but boy, he says things that are inflammatory. And so he reminds me of a Wallace or Huey Long, a Southern populist back there, who would be, but the early Trump in 15, when he started getting crowds, it was like people would go to be entertained.
Right.
I don't
and
think
they gave him some rope, right?
They gave him a lot.
And just waiting for that inevitable meltdown, which I think we all waited for. And he just kept surviving, for lack of a better word. And he had a field of 17 other wannabe nominees, and in 1 week he would do something so incredibly stupid that you thought, okay, this is it. But is that, I just worry.
He eviscerated the opponents, eviscerated them with, because people don't like politicians. And he also, that self-funding that he had going with them. But I think history, if Trump loses, which I believe most likely he will, you never know to election day.
Most likely?
Most likely.
How can he have
only way Trump could win, I think, Lance, would be if the economy took some kind of crazy tank, say September. Britain may pull out of the European Union and markets get weird. Things happen where the economy goes bad, and then there's terror attacks. It's only negatives. Something so awful that happens.
Or she's indicted.
Indicted or something like that. But his odds don't look good. So if he loses, I think we'll see it as the last gasp of white male superiority, the male privilege and prerogative that had been a steady point in American history from all the founding fathers being white and on, that it's a breaking point now. And that what'll turn against Trump, and already is the Latino and Latina voters who are registering massively now,
right,
just to do away with Trump, and the fact that we have a first woman president coming in Hillary Clinton. I think Hillary Clinton's extremely lucky to be running against Donald Trump. I don't think he's a very strong general election candidate because he has so much high negatives.
Lucky in the sense that if she were running against
Jeb Bush
or a Mitt Romney, or
Mitt Romney could beat her in this season. But alas, it's Trump. And the fact that Republicans are trying to not be associated, like we're for Trump, but we're not for Trump, and he's got them double talking. They're a mess right now.
They're completely,
and it's so bad that many Republicans don't want to be a VP nominee. It's a career killer to become Trump's VP. So a lot of top tier people.
Sarah Palin will do it.
Well, Sarah Palin will do it, and I think Chris Christie will do it, and I think Newt Gingrich probably would do it.
Rick Perry would do
it. There's a handful, but the ones that have futures, Paul Ryan, Marco Rubio, they're smart enough to not want to be too contaminated by him. He's toxic.
Do we need a third party?
You got one with the Libertarian Party, but the only reason I mentioned
they don't. I mean that I have this dream that Mike Bloomberg decides to run for president.
Well, that would be big.
That would be big, but Mike Bloomberg is going to get because of the current structure, he's in the teens.
Remember in 1992, Ross Perot won 19% of the vote. I think that Libertarian Party with former Governor Johnson of New Mexico and Weld of Massachusetts, they might get 12, 14%, just people that can't vote for Hillary but want to vote. And that only helps Hillary Clinton, that Libertarian Party. Those are dissatisfied group, the Rand Paul Republicans breaking from the party. Not this season. I think we keep look. It's the money that third party. It almost says you have to be a Ross Perot or you went right to Bloomberg. You got to be almost a billionaire to self-fund because.
Well, I like Michael Bloomberg because I think he did a good job. I mean, being the mayor of New York City is not an easy job, but I think he did a good job for what he was faced with. I don't think he's at all susceptible to any sort of outside influence because he just doesn't care. He doesn't need to care about that. I think he's got strong views, and he doesn't give a shit what people think or say about him.
I agree, and if he would have run in 2015 and organized for it, he probably could have made a real run at it because basically people are sick of politics and the party structure, meaning we're voting on negatives, right? Hillary Clinton and Trump. However, I think Hillary Clinton has a chance. It is going to be a historic first woman president, and it's a big deal. And she certainly has a competence factor. And so it's a pretty good year, I think, for the Democrats. But we'll see. Let's see what also plays out in Philadelphia for the Democrats in Cleveland. Right. I mean, what a circus, particularly, I think.
Oh, Cleveland! I mean, the Republican National Convention is going to be, a version of Rage Against the Machine. The band is reuniting called Prophets of Rage. And
is that so? Are they there? I didn't know that.
Without Zach singing, but with a few other guys. So they are doing a show that, I mean, it is going to be, I think we should, load up on the police force. It's just going to be so hot. So two final questions. Barack Obama, over the course of his entire presidency, so all 8 years, what do you give him in terms of a grade?
Very high grade.
A high grade.
I give him a higher grade than a lot of people would. First off, he's won 2 national.
Like give me an actual, like you're a student, like a B, C, D.
B plus, A minus.
Wow.
I say that because he won 2 elections. He's appointed 2 women to the Supreme Court. If Hillary wins, which looks likely, he would get his 3rd Supreme Court appointee in. The economy was in the Great Recession. He pulled it out. Not fully enough, but an economic recovery nevertheless. He can leave saying, are we better off than we were 8 years ago economically? The answer is a resounding yes. Right. And if Hillary Clinton wins, Obamacare will become a little bit more like Medicaid or Medicare. It'll become a birthright of kind of Americans. If that settles in, that's a big piece of the progressive puzzle to give, there are lives being saved due to the Affordable Care Act. And I think I never find him he never was an embarrassment. Wherever he is in the world traveling, you always feel he's going to be the adult in the room. He's mature. So I think also what comes after him, we do, Lance, overall give ex-presidents a more favorable rating once they leave.
Well, obviously. I mean, a year ago, George W. had a higher approval rating than Barack Obama.
Well, there you go.
So there you go.
And also now you're seeing...
I don't think that's the case today, but...
Not today, but Obama's like at 50% now, 52 or 3. By the time he leaves, probably be 55, 56. But not bad. And
which is just only going to climb.
Only going to climb. And then he's young. He is going to write one of the great memoirs of most presidential memoirs are patched together he's going to write a full one because he's a writer at heart. And he'll do a beautiful book about his presidency.
And not to mention, he's just going to make an absolute shitload traveling the world speaking.
Unbelievable.
I mean, it's going to be...
And his book advances off the charts.
Off the chart. I mean,
probably 20 million advance for his book. And
really?
Same with Michelle or close to that. They'll probably be able to net 30 million, 40 million bucks out of 2 big memoirs. That's how high that market is for him.
Golly.
That's what he's going to live on. That's his...
I think he can do that.
He can do that.
I mean, I don't know about you, but...
And I think Hawaii is going to be a big part of his life. And,
should be.
And he has a real look at, he's very interested in Pacific Basin affairs.
Well, they're trying to create, and they're in this, I'm gonna butcher this, but I guess what's the senator there trying to expand this marine park there, just the envelope of that.
National Monument, marine thing, that'll be big.
And I think
he spent a lot of time, he'll spend time in D.C.
He needs to do that.
Yep, I agree with you. And he's got a presidential library in Chicago. Yep. And so he'll be East Coast, Midwest, and then Hawaii. But I push Hawaii because I think he'll be our first ex-president that really will have be on the doorstep of China and Japan, Indonesia, Vietnam, and first Pacific-looking president. All of our other presidents, ex and in office, always have looked towards Europe. I see in Obama looking towards Asia.
That's a great point. That's a great. And by the way, why wouldn't you be in Hawaii if you were him?
Yeah, why exactly? And he likes golfing, and he's comfortable there. It's a great. So we're not done with him, but I think he's this past year he's on a roll. And then things like Cuban affairs, but we don't know. History, you got to wait. Will the Iranian deal hold up with that he did there? Some of the foreign policy decisions he made are still controversial. We'll have to see how they play out in history, but I think he's looking pretty good.
Mm-hmm. And the greatest president of all time. That's like the third most.
Franklin Roosevelt and Abraham Lincoln are, I think, the two greats. I'm a big George Washington fan, but there's nothing like FDR, 4 terms, winning World War II and getting us through the Great Depression, and then Lincoln through the Civil War. Those are the two giants in my mind. As president, as figures, Washington and Jefferson and Hamilton is in the rage now. They're all giant American history figures, but as president, FDR I've put first and kind of tied with Lincoln, FDR and Lincoln.
Great. Doug, thank you.
Thanks Lance. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for sitting down and chatting. And
I'm glad you're doing this.
Thank you.